Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Pennyworth as well as the latest episode of Preacher. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below, include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Pennyworth, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of Preacher. But the first thing I want to talk about is this week's episode of Pennyworth. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love where we kind of pick up with everything in this episode, kind of like, after everything that went down with Julian's death and everything. And it's so interesting seeing Thomas. Thomas isn't an idiot. He actually kind of jumps on this pretty quickly because he's asking Dave Boyd, like, what the hell went wrong? He's like, yeah, I cocked it up. Oh, some mass assailant. Somebody did this and that. And they also carried you out. Who were they working for? It's like, oh, you know who I think? And he brings up Alfred's there. I love when he first comes in, Alfred and Dave Boyd are just looking the other way. It's like that's supposed to do something. But I just love that they keep doing that while he's talking. It's like, yeah. And it points when he's talking to Alfred, Alfred's still looking the other way. But for him to figure it out to be like, oh, you did this. And I think that you did it because Undine, like, she set this whole thing in motion, because he's like, oh, I know that you're close friends with John Ripper, and John Ripper did it for us. So I love that whole situation. He figured it out. I mean, he didn't bring up the whole Undine being the one behind it, but he figured that John Ripper was answering to someone else. It's actually kind of interesting, like, there's a whole conversation of, like, basically, oh, you're trying to threaten me? And Alfred's like, no, I don't make threats, because I don't want you. Why would I tell you what I'm about to do? I love that line of, like, yeah, why make a threat? Like, I want it to be a surprise. Like, why let you know I'm coming at you? That was kind of neat. But Alfred pretty much got it figured out. Like, yeah, he's CIA. He's not really he's just pretending to be an activist with the no-name league. But what was interesting, though, is he goes and talks to his handler, and that whole situation of, like, figuring it out there, and which is interesting that it's like the U.S. government. I mean, to be fair, like, it's the CIA. It makes sense. Like I said, the CIA comes in and kind of like disrupts stuff to a certain extent. They slide other powerhouses in the world to kind of go more in the direction they want to. I mean, I think that's the role of all. It's about self-preservation for the respective countries that any spy is from, while also shifting balances to fit what you need them to be, type of situation. And because it's like, apparently, like, the connection between Undine and the CIA is John is working with them. So does that mean he really cares about Undine, or is he just doing this on behalf of the CIA? Is it the type of thing of, like, obviously we don't know 100% of the illicit stuff that he's up to, but just that enough people are like, he's a very, very bad man. And I'm wondering, is the CIA giving him a lot more leeway if he kind of helps them? So does he actually care for her, or is he actually just manipulating her because it's beneficial to him and the CIA? Like, whatever it is they're doing, there's like a election coming up I think they're saying a congressional election, and they need peace and quiet in London for like 6 months, because I guess they don't want that to kind of be a distraction, or at the very least, I guess it will help whoever's trying to work their way up the totem pole type of situation, if they can, like, reference of, like, oh man, look at what's going on, and all things were chaotic but things are quiet now. So it's interesting that we find ourselves in this. I'm curious to see what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. Like I said, I've thrown out my thoughts, but maybe there's more to it than that, something more specific. And because I feel like I just kind of may have gotten the broad strokes, but I feel like there's a deeper meaning behind this. Because it's interesting, because, like, Thomas kind of goes along with everything, but you can tell he is frustrated by it, just being like, because he even talks to Alfred about it later on, where he's just kind of like, I'm someone who asks a lot of questions and tells too many lies. I mean, that's just sadly the life of a CIA agent. But, I'm curious, like, what the plan is. I mean, to be fair, like, there was a meeting between Undine and Francis, and that was kind of interesting. And I love that Thomas was in that position where it's like, oh, if she doesn't agree to the peace talks, then she kind of has to go away. You'll have to take care of it. And he's like, personally? And it's so interesting because both him and Martha, like, you can tell they're super not okay with a lot of stuff that they have to do, but it's like, so you're not going to do it? It's like, yeah, yes, of course I'll do it. So I guess it's that thing of, like, I don't think Thomas has ever, killed anyone before. I think that would have been the first time. So obviously he wasn't quick to, want to jump on that. So obviously, because obviously the same thing kind of applied in Martha's case. Which, speaking of Martha, I love that Thomas's sister Patricia pops back up again. I love him being like, you literally came at the worst time. I've got this business thing, and it's like, all right, Martha, I need you to look after my sister for me. It's like, okay, let's go with a cover story that's kind of easy to believe. Where exes, it's like, and Martha's like, well, who dumped who? And it's like, does it matter? It's like, well, your sister looks like the type of person who'll ask questions like that. It's like, you dumped me. It's like, we'll leave it at that. And just kind of like, yes, keep an eye on my sister because, she's likely to do anything. And Martha was basically like, I forgot what and he was like, oh, she's not going to do anything. He's like, no, didn't you literally just say that she would do anything? So Donna had to be a little more careful around yourself. It's a whole thing. Which that storyline, I'm like, where the hell is that going? Because they go to some party with Aleister Crowley, and then there's like this whole thing, because we see that Jason's there. I'm like, whoa, this is about it. Especially because Patricia started dancing with him. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. This is going to end up being bad. But then nothing does happen necessarily until they're ready to leave, because like Patricia's dressed up like weirdly like that, and it's like, what's going on? Aleister's taking a liking to Martha. And he talks about the whole fact is of people kind of like broken wings. It's like you can build someone that's kind of like that. You can build them up, kind of filled with them love, but then you can just so as easily break them again. I'm like, which I'm wondering, is that kind of like referencing a little bit to maybe some stuff in Martha's life, or was he just talking about her as a general person of just kind of like she has that air about her? Is there something in her past? I mean, maybe it's specifically this Alfred and Esme situation that's kind of weighing on her. He even talked about her sad eyes, And I'm curious. But then she leaves, and then like it's like, wait, what? We're back in the same room, and now it's kind of a bit of an orgy. Wait, what? Back in the same room again, and everyone's standing parted ways, and then she sees a hairy face, a whole bunch of eyes. I was like, is that supposed to be kind of like Satan or something? Which is interesting because like Satan's kind of labeled as kind of like that goat man creature. I guess that's just kind of like true to that. Whatever the case may be, and I'm like, wait, what the hell is going on? And then later on, like Martha, it turns out because Thomas is like, yeah, my sister and Martha have been missing for like 2 days. It's like, what the hell? What is that? What is that, like a satanic? I mean, cult? Like, what the hell is that? I mean, Martha waking up naked like that. Like, wait, what the hell happened? And she was alone. So it's like, what happened to Patricia? Like, how did Patricia find herself in? I mean, we saw that she had that invitation. I was like, the moment I saw that, I was like, yeah, that can't be good. And it turned into this whole thing. It's like, what the hell is that storyline? I don't know where the hell that's going, what that's potentially setting up. But that's interesting. So there's that side of things. Another side of things is Alfred himself, obviously trying to figure out. John sends him down the route of meeting with this lady named the Baroness, and he's talking to her, and she's claiming to be a witch, but because Alfred is the way he is, he's like, oh, there's no such thing as ghosts and witches and stuff like that, which I'm like, that's funny. I mean, because I was actually kind of surprised they'd even tackle something like that. I mean, I don't think it's going to be the biggest thing, but like, I think it's kind of winks and nods, because like, I figured this show would be fairly grounded. I figured it wouldn't tackle anything maybe to the grander scheme of the DCU, even like the DC universe, or even something in regards of like a lot of Batman related stuff. Like I said, there might be deep cuts that I'm just not aware of, but regardless, it's just interesting because he makes that whole remark, which I'm like, let's not forget this is the DC universe. Like, there's a lot of magic and supernatural stuff, and I think the Baroness kind of is on that Constantine, because like magic does exist in the universe, whether it be like a Constantine or like a Zatanna type of situation. But at first he's like, yeah, whatever. And she's like, well, you'll come back. When the moon's full, bring me a rose and the left hand of a murderer. Obviously, Alfie was just like, whatever. And I love he goes to visit John, and he's like, oh, you tricked me. And he's like, no, I didn't. I think she really can't help you. But even if I did trick you, what are you going to do about it? And Alfred doesn't say anything because it's like, yeah, I can't do anything. I love that. That shows you how intimidating John Ripper is. That the fact is, it's like, Alfred was kind of lost for words. He's like, I'm very disappointed in you. And John's like, almost has this look like, oh, he's sad for a second. And he's kind of like, well, that's life. I just love that immediate response after that pause like that, obviously his mom and dad are worried about him being like, oh, but he's being like, no, I'm sorry, I've been kind of down lately, I've been kind of a burden on you guys, but I promise I'm gonna get my old job back, at the club, and I'm gonna be good again. And I'm like, what was kind of interesting is when his dad touched his hand, he was kind of, I guess because, and it kind of goes into something he had talked about with Basil, where it's kind of like he's on edge. I think when his dad touched his hand, it just kind of made him go, because he's angry. That's because right now, like, he already wasn't in the best situation, just because obviously this is coming off his service with the army, but also now losing Esme. It's just kind of a lot, and that's just, that anger and just, probably self-hatred because, he blames himself, but also knowing that her killer is out there and he hasn't caught them and doesn't know who they are. Like, obviously that anger gets to him, even to the point, like, the moment stuff gets started in the club, and him and that dude take it outside, I'm like, yeah, you could tell Alfred was kind of enjoying it a little bit too, because he was angry, he just needed an outlet. It's almost like, Alfred was literally looking for an excuse to start some shit. And him and that dude fight. He grabs the machete and slices the dude's hand off. I'm like, ugh. And everyone else is just kind of like, oh, ooh. And Alfred's there and be like, yeah, I'm good. I'm not that bad. And then he looks at the reflection in the water. There's a full moon in the sky. There's the rose beside the left hand. And he's like, how the hell did she do that? Which is pretty damn impressive. He sneaks in and talks to her, and he basically takes her on she takes him on quite the vision quest, I guess. There's obviously his time at war when he was in the army. He opens a door. And I love that you couldn't tell, like, what was real and what wasn't. It's like, wait, what? It's like, oh, you should go. It's like, what? Things are kind of weird and blurry and just moving things. It's like him and Dave Boy and Baza, and then, like, everything with Sandra, which is interesting because because obviously Alfie was kind of caught up in everything. He wasn't paying her attention. She just calls him a bastard. I love Dave Boy thinking it was about him. He's like, all I did was ask for some, like, some chips. Like, why the hell am I a bastard for that? But then it's like, I'm interested to see where that goes. But like I said, she was a part of Division 2, so I'm like, I guess it's kind of like a little foreshadowing of what's to come. Obviously, like, there's also, like, Spanish was there, obviously continuing. The fact is, I think, Alfred's still kind of being, maybe it's all connected to a certain extent. Maybe that's supposed to represent, because it turns out the person in particular that might have killed Esme was his captain from back then, which is like, why? That's the big thing, because even Basil was asking, like, why would he hold such a grudge against you? It's like, because you embarrassed him 5 years ago? But the fact of the matter is, that can mean so much depending on who he is. If he's like some, like, dude who's kind of been beat down his entire life, embarrassed, and feels like he's not good enough, like, he could snap. Hell, like, because Basil was like, yeah, that was 5 years ago. Why would he hold a grudge? Who knows what happened to him in those 5 years? But to be fair, you think he'd be holding on to it the entire time. Because when, like, it's like you didn't see it, Alfred's like, you didn't see it, Basil. Like, if you looked in his eyes, in that one instant when we buried Spanish, you would have seen pure murder, because he was embarrassed in front of all those people and he was pissed at Al. But like I said, I think he's probably one of those people that might have felt like he needed to prove himself just like back then or whatever. Because once again, we know, we only know this because of Bet, but it's like there was a guy and woman that went in there. So it's like, part of me was wondering, was it actually him? Or is this some, like, long orchestrated thing from someone else? When Alfred and Baza and Dave Boy go there, it's like, okay, they're going to go there. And even Baza's like, promise me there's no bloodshed, because we literally have no proof it's this guy. And Alfred's like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I wouldn't hold too strong to that, yeah, because the way Alfred just said that was kind of like a, yeah, sure, with my fingers crossed behind my back type of thing. That response. But the guy left a note and being like, oh, I know it's the truth and stuff. I'm like, that just seems a little too easy, because even she was like, oh, is that what you think? That's why I'm like, I don't think it's a definite, like, either he's a piece to this larger puzzle, or maybe, he's just, maybe he is involved, or maybe he's not. Maybe he's just being used as a cover by who's ever really behind this. I don't know. And then on top of all of that, you have everything with Harwood kind of slowly remembering the moment he sees the Prime Minister on TV. It reminds him, like, oh yeah, that's the guy who tortured me, and he start remembering more, and it's like, yes, I am Lord James Harwood, and he's out to seek his revenge and whatnot, and, you know, he's like, I have to go, I can't wait, I have to get him back, he has to pay, he has to die, and he's inviting Peggy and Bet because they're like his basically his besties. They're such loyal people. They've been so good to him. It's like, if you hadn't taken care of me, it's like this. I would have never thought that storyline with Bet and Peggy would evolve into what it's evolved into. Like every episode, just changing and changing into what it is now with Harwood. But they're coming back to London, which is going to be interesting because, like, obviously, like, I'm curious, well, she's going to have to pretend to be dead. I'm curious if she's going to cross paths with Alfred or not, because she might blame Alfred, because it's like, oh, it's kind of your fault that Esme might, I don't know if she's going to reveal herself, but I feel like everything's going to come to a head to a certain extent, like everything with the No Name League and the Raven Society now that they've made peace. Also, what does that mean? Because I didn't even think about that. Yeah, what does that mean now that if Harwood returns? Like, well, he's not dead, so it's like, what happens? You know, will he try to take back the spot from Francis? I mean, what would that mean for the peace that currently exists? He might come, kill Francis, take over things, and that might undo it, and Civil War starts all over again. You know, I have no idea like how that's going to end up playing out, and what role Harwood's going to play in all this, especially if he's going to be gunning for the Prime Minister. That's definitely going to send things into major upheaval. And then, like I said, I'm sure the CIA is going to get involved, you know, especially, I don't know. Because it's so curious, because remember John had said, like, oh, Undine, like, the country's going to basically be yours, but it's like she made a peace treaty. So is that supposed to be kind of like like, it is hers to a certain extent, because now it's like her and Francis are kind of like keeping everything idle. We're trying to restore the glory that is London. Or is it going to be a situation of this is a means to an end, that eventually it's like, oh, we're peace treaty now, but she's just waiting to make her move? I don't know, because the whole conversation made it seem like, oh, it's about making sure that all of London is hers. But to be fair, once again, that could just be John Ripper manipulating her, because the CIA was kind of like, yeah, push her more in this direction. Like, yeah, kind of pull her in by being like, oh, it's all going to be yours, but kind of whisper in the ear to her later on, being like, oh, maybe a peace treaty is best. Now that you have the power and the position, now you're in a better position to kind of do things your own way. Like, this is the first step to many steps. I don't know. That's something to kind of keep in the back of our mind. So, like I said, I'm very interested to see where all of this end up taking us going forward in the next episode. And now moving on to this week's episode of Preacher. Holy crap. There's a lot of stuff to break down about this episode. Let's kind of run through it. So, first of all, there's a whole situation with Jesse trying to rent a car, and he's getting it from, you know, that dude Jackson, and the guy sees like, oh, the wanted flyer poster or whatever about Jesse, and he's like, all that stuff you're reading online is wrong about me, this and that. And I thought it was kind of interesting. Jesse's basically like, I have the power to make people do whatever I want them to. I even, you know, back in Texas, I made a cop mace his own balls, which I was thinking to myself, which season was that? It was season 2. It was literally the first, those cops they met at the beginning of season 2 in episode 1. That whole situation, I was like, right. But for him, he doesn't want to use the word because he sees just how backlash it can be, like everything that went down with the pilot last episode. So of course, like, he's reluctant to use it. So he's like, I'm trying not to use it. The fact of the matter is, but I need you to rent me a car. And dude ultimately does, and Jesse does help him out, and it's like, okay, you no longer stutter, and, you know, sadly that leads the cowboy straight to him. And then, like, Jesse's taking his time. It's just little things. I love the fact that he's getting in the car and it's the wrong side. He's just like, right, different country. Gets in on the other side. And I'm like, the fact is they're taking a slow time with him exiting the parking lot. I'm like, oh my God, is it? Can we know the cowboy and Eugene? It's like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And a truck almost hits him and he stops. And I was like, oh, that happened for a reason. And God's trying to make this meeting happen. He looks and it's Eugene. I'm like, oh. And Eugene's looking, he's like, Eugene? It's like, and Eugene's like, go. And, you know, you have Jesse driving away. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, oh, that's so good. They were so close. That was so close, dude. And then Jesse telling himself, "No, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay." You know, if he wanted the Saint wanted to kill Eugene, he would have killed him already. And once again, another truck comes out of nowhere to stop Jesse. Once again, God is putting everything in Jesse's way. Obviously, it's just to give him enough time to, like, the fact is he has to stop. He has to ends up thinking about it. It's like, shit, I gotta go back for Eugene. And even the Saint's kind of hoping on it because he's like, oh, he's gonna come back so I don't hurt you. Jesse set some stuff in motion. I was wondering what they're going to do at that construction. I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Bulldozer hits him with the wrecking ball. Bam! I was like, oh, definitely not going to count him out, obviously, but still. And, you know, Jesse leaves with Eugene. I was like, whoa. I was like, are we going? So what's going to happen? And they sit down and they finally have to talk. I'm like, oh my God. He's like, why didn't you ever come and get me? It's like, I didn't know I could. I mean, granted, he's crossed paths with Hell before. He crossed paths with them in season 2 when they came to pick up Eugene, but I guess he never knew there was like a direct line to it. I mean, to be fair, that direct line in his case would have been the Grail, and that was a whole complicated situation. Then it definitely was in season 3. It's kind of interesting because his grandma had a connection to Satan in that whole situation, so something could have been worked out, but still, Jesse's like, no matter what the circumstances is, it doesn't make up for it. Because I talked about that before. He forgot all about Eugene. He made such a point of it at the end of season 1, being like, don't worry, I haven't forgotten about you. And he got so caught up in everything, his search for God, this and that. Like, I don't, like, you can honestly say Eugene was never in the forefront in his mind. Doesn't mean he wasn't still thinking about it. Maybe we weren't inside Jesse's head, so it could have been there just, because all the bad stuff that he's done a lot of bad stuff in his life, and I'm sure that's one of those things to just stick out, especially because Eugene's like the last remnant of Anvil, so like that makes you feel extra guilty too, because literally everything about his world is completely and utterly gone now. But nevertheless, he apologizes and everything. And it's like, I like that because he's like, you're a good Christian. He's like, honestly, I don't know what that means anymore. But the fact is, you're a good kid, The fact is, I'm your preacher. You looked up to me and I let you down. I even sent you to hell. And it's like, so. And then Eugene was like, thanks for the apology. And it's like, oh. I was like, wow. I honestly didn't expect things to kind of go that well. I was like, oh, I'm surprised. And then you see little bits here and there where Eugene's kind of looking at him, like kind of doing some stuff. Like obviously he's knocking out a couple. He's like, no, he's good. He's awake. He's okay. And then Eugene grabs something. I was like, wait a minute. What are you? He's like, he's grabbing the gun. And as they're driving, he's like, you apologize, and that's what I wanted. And he's like, I mean, you deserve that much. But for Eugene, it's like, that's not enough. And he shoots Jesse. I'm like, what? I'm not surprised, but like Eugene had made such a point to be like, all you can ask for is forgiveness. But even when at that moment, because even Jesse was like, I know you'll probably never forgive me, but just know that how sorry I am. But it's like, sorry isn't good enough. You sent me to hell. And it's so interesting. And I think that speaks volumes that Eugene, out of any people, especially because he's always been the kind of more like, oh, it's all part of God's plan. It's all okay. But I think spending time with the cowboy, but maybe not even just that, maybe just having been sent to hell, it's that thing of like, oh, you have this very positive attitude, and it's basically him trying to keep a smile on his face just so he can stop himself from breaking down and crying. I think it's all a mask he put on. Or maybe it took meeting Jesse to make all those feelings you're feeling, like you thought everything would be okay with you, but it's like, no, it's bubbling beneath the surface, you're super pissed, and you shoot him. It's like, whoa, and a cowboy's there. It's like I don't like, because Eugene's like, an apology can't beat a bullet to the brain. So the question is, does he want Jesse dead, or does he just want Jesse to suffer? I mean, obviously, like, the cowboy wants Jesse down as well, but the thing is, I'm curious to see where that goes. I mean, like I said, I'm curious, like, does that show you that there is no hope? I mean, maybe that was all part of the plan too. Maybe this is part of God's plan to get rid of Jesse by using someone kind like Eugene to do it is what is necessary to the plan. Because like I said, he's the one. If anyone was going to do that to Jesse, you would have never expected it to be Eugene. So it's like, where's that storyline going? I gotta know, dude. Holy crap! It's like, And in all honesty, that's more the confrontation I kind of would have expected. I would have expected Eugene to kind of be pissed, especially at the end of season 3. He's like, "I'm gonna go with you." It seemed like he wanted to pay Jesse back then, but it was like but then like season 4 in this season, it seemed like, oh no, like he was kind of forgiving Jesse or whatever. But at the end of season 3, I was kind of under the impression like, oh, he's going to get his revenge or something like that. But it seems like he's on his way to doing it. So I'm so curious to see where that goes. You have Tulip and Jesus going to the motel, meeting up with Cassidy. I love this is their first time talking, and really kind of finding out everything. It's like, oh yeah, everything that went down with Cassidy last season. Oh yeah, that vampire who was killing other vampires just so he could turn himself into a cat. Which, interesting note, I didn't know this at the time because I'm blanking on the actor's name, and I'm even blanking on his what's the vampire character dude from last season. Regardless, that actor, he was in Reign. But another interesting thing, if you're a Final Fantasy fan, especially Final Fantasy 15, he's the actor who voiced Ignis. I was like, what? I did not realize that was him last season. That just kind of blew my mind. I was like, holy crap, I totally did not know that. So that was just pretty dope to kind of find that out. So regardless, and you also have Tulip being like, but he's like, oh yeah, what I went through is nothing compared to you, Tulip, like literally fighting a bus full of Nazis on your way to hell. It's like, well, I love the compare and contrast. And then I love the angel walking by him and Jesus lock eyes, and they just lock eyes and then they don't say anything to each other, and then they just go their separate ways. I'm like, okay. So obviously you have Cassie be like, I kind of screwed up. Whereas Jesse, and they see the news about Jesse. I love the whole thing about, what was it? Basically they're painting him as like, oh, like basically the preacher killing innocent perverts. It's like these people were just living their lives being perverts. And lo and behold, here comes some preacher. Obviously, that's the whole Grail making that spin. But still, it's so good that they're just like, oh, look at these poor innocent perverts that were killed by this bloodthirsty preacher. I'm like, I love that that's a thing. And obviously, it's plastered all over the place. Because even at one point when Jesse's in the car, he's listening to the radio. And it's like, oh, the first news thing. It's like, yep, crazy preacher still on the loose. It's like, never forget that. Cassidy wants to make it up to him because he's like, I was so caught up in my own BS. Jesse was being a good mate and he came to save me and I didn't. You know what I told him? He's like, you rather get your foreskin cut off. And he's like, yeah. So I got to make it up to him. So he wants to go help. It's like, shit kind of goes wrong when we get separated. But I also love Tulip being like, did you tell him that we slept together? And Cassie's not saying anything. She's like, it's okay. Like, I'm not going to be mad. And he's like, yeah. And she punches him in the face. And to be fair, his defense, I mean, it's not much of a defense, but you were dead at the time, so, obviously, like, Cassidy wasn't in the best place. He wanted to hurt Jesse just because it's like, you let her die. He was just pissed at Jesse, so. But, yeah. But Tulip's kind of like, nah, I'm not going to help Jesse. She's like, me and Jesus, we're going to hit the road. Why don't you come along, too? So that's definitely going to be, that's interesting. I was like, oh, we're going to get the road trip. That would have been wild. But what was interesting is, the conversation between the angel dude and Cassidy about love and everything and forbidden love. And then he makes note of like, oh yeah, like basically he was saying, I literally got kicked out of heaven, locked up, all for a piece of ass. And then he turned around and like, oh, who pops up? A lady. I'm like, and the fact is he said it before even anything happens. I was like, she's a demon, isn't she? Because I was like, the whole conversation of forbidden love and all that, it's like, it can only be because, yep, she's a demon. Now, me being who I am, my brain immediately thought like, you don't think they're who I think they are. I doubt it, but my brain immediately went like, an angel and a demon, doing their thing. I'm like, you don't think they're Genesis parents, do you? I was like, no, it can't be, right? I mean, I don't know if that's something. I mean, maybe that's something they answered in the comic books. I don't know the comic books, or comic book / graphic novel. I don't know it, so maybe it's a little. I don't know. I don't know if that's something he's even tackled at all. And that's something they'd even bother answering at this point in the series. But I was like, just the fact is, if you have an angel and demon, then they're like banging it out and just like shaking the whole place. I even love that Cassie makes reference to himself, compares himself to Han Solo, and it's like, oh, have you seen it? And the dude's, which I wonder, is that true? Like, kind of like motion pictures are kind of an affront to Allah. Like, I didn't know that. I think in certain religions, like that probably be the case of like, Whatever the case may be, I just thought that was kind of an interesting line. It's just like, oh, okay. But regardless, Cassidy's kind of doing what he wants, kind of like Tulip is. And, his pal comes back and he draws out his sword. I'm like, what the hell are you about to do? And lo and behold, he throws the sword and kills it. He's like, what? I thought you said you loved her. It's like, yeah, I do, but she's a demon. And I guess that's supposed to be the whole thing of like, because maybe he knows because of the state of the world where things are heading with the whole apocalypse and everything. So maybe for him it's like, or maybe it's supposed to be kind of like a nature thing of like, yeah, we love each other, but no matter what the circumstances may be, she's still a demon and I'm an angel. We can't fight. Or maybe it's like even after everything happened, his natural instincts as an angel kicked in to kind of kill her, which we have not seen a multitude of bodies and coming back to life like that since season 1, since the hotel room scene between Cassidy, Jesse, and Fiora and the Blanc. Was Cassidy a part of that, or was that just Jesse? I don't remember. I think that all 4 of them were involved in that fight. Regardless, we haven't seen and Cassidy just kind of like, okay, and he's leaving out the door while all that stuff is going down, and then there's like the whole thing with Tulip. Her and Jesus are talking about stuff. And he's talking about like how the fact is like, oh, Humperdew, my son, and it's like, oh, Humperdew is so, yeah, he's like perfect. He's my dad's favorite. And Tulip was like, well, the thing about Humperdew, and she kind of gets cut off, but I guess she was going to talk about, Humperdew just in general. But it's like, yeah, your dad's kind of an asshole. He's like, don't say that. It's like, well, if anyone can say that, and it's entitled to say that is Tulip, because she's had conversations with your dad. She realizes how much of an asshole he is. Watching Jesse's story, we can see how much of an asshole he is. But yeah, it's kind of also weird too, because we're seeing Jesus getting high. I also love the whole thing of like, oh yeah, walking on water and turning water to wine is kind of a metaphor. So that's interesting. And then, but Tulip and him kind of hit the road. It's like, whoa, it's so exciting, and then like, oh yeah, and then things kind of get quiet because like, yeah, Tulip's kind of thinking about, not having Cassidy, not having Jesse. It's just not a fun. And I love her being like, well, we could rob banks. And I love Jesus thinking about it. And the guy was like, Jesus, I have to go to the bathroom. The guy's like, no. Jesus is like, no. And accidentally shoots the guy. He's like, Jesus, you shot me. And Tulip trying to make him feel better. It's like, you don't have to participate. You could just be the lookout. I love the thought of Jesus robbing banks with Tulip. I love it. It's so good. But for him, it turns into that thing of he's got responsibilities. He had talked about it before. It's like, I was just a man before all those responsibilities, but now it's kind of like, well, this is where I'm supposed to be. And I think he just can't walk away. It's like, this is what my dad's asking of me. Like, can I really just walk away? It's the thing, I think, and that's the point he was trying to make later on. Because we do have free will that we can do whatever we want, it makes it the hardest thing. Because even when you can have the ability to do whatever you want, it still confines you to what you want. Like, even though Tulip says she can do whatever she wants, there's still that part of her that's like, yes, I want to go look for Jesse to make sure he's okay because I do care about him. So that's the hardest thing about it. Like, even when you can do whatever you want, you're still pulled in certain directions, and once again, it almost seems like obviously all part of God's plan potentially, so that in itself, I think, is just so fascinating. So he goes back to Masada, which, let's talk about everything went down to Masada. Freaking, you have Featherstone being like, yeah, I'm ready to die. I deserve it. And he's like, good. And it's like, literally that we haven't seen that situation come up since season 2. I mean, in season 3, he threatened to kill them too. He actually made good on that bet when he killed Hoover. Hoover won, we gotta specify. But then it's like, okay, he wouldn't do it, and the phone he's about to do it, but the phone rings, and he passes it to Hoover too. And I love Featherstone being like, what? No, you don't have the authority to do it. If anyone's going to kill me, sir, it's going to be you, not Hoover too. And he's like, it's just like, oh, well, you think I'm gonna get, what you gonna do, get your brains on me? He's like, no, I'm gonna get your brains on you. It's just so childish that Featherstone is acting like that. It's like, no, if anyone's going to kill me, it's going to be Harry Star, because obviously she respects him, and in her own way, she loves him. But it's like, yeah, the only thing you're going to do is die here, get wrapped up, is basically what Hera was saying. But because she refused to get killed by Hoover too, she jumps out the window, glides away. And that's the last we see of her, which I'm like, where's that going to go? Obviously, no coming back to Masada for you, because now it's kind of like, which is a shame because like she wholeheartedly believes in the Grail is kind of all she has. So now that that's going down, it's like, okay, so where your story going? You're going to cross paths with Tulip again, aren't you? Oh, dude, I'm curious to see, like, is she going to die at the end of this? Because spoilers for, like, because I did a little bit of research, and this might be spoilers for the comic book, but her and Hoover do die in the comic books. Like, it's actually, I think Hare actually kills her in the comic book, and that actually leads to Hoover trying to get revenge for her, and he ends up dying in the process because Hare ends up killing him. That's, like I said, there's, like, because I do know their stories play out way differently in the comic books to a certain extent. I don't think she's even, like, her character in the show, I think is quite different from who she is in the comic book, I believe. Like I said, I could be wrong. But regardless of all of that, so I'm curious to see where that goes, whether she actually kicks it with, like, Tulip and Cassidy, maybe. I love that Hairstar took that tennis racket and started beating on Hitler and being like, oh, he's like, yeah, I saw Humberdew, like, oh, he's so wonderful and perfect. And Hairstar's like, Now the question then becomes, when Hitler played the piano last episode, did Humberdew dance? We still never got an answer to that. Or is it just supposed, because I was like, okay, so you're the Christ child, so it's like, okay, I guess he was expecting something more spectacular, or he wanted to know what was up. Now, I'm curious to see what Hitler's got planned. The fact is, he's just shifty, so I guess that was just enough reason to be like, oh, I'm going to go investigate, see what this whole thing's about. But obviously him and Jesus sitting down about the whole, apocalypse plan and everything at the end, I'm like, okay, so where is this all heading? Potentially, you got Cassidy and Tulip on the road. What about Angel Dude and Demon later? Are they just going to be fighting forever? Is it going to turn into what some people might refer to as fight fucking? That's not my term. It's a term I picked up from elsewhere. I'm trying to remember specifically where I heard that from. Regardless. So I'm curious where that's going to go as well, so we'll see. Very interested to see where the next episode takes us with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, love life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.